Joining us now is my fellow journalist, Alex Zdan, a former U.S. Senate candidate himself and longtime TV reporter who covered the Murphy administration for years. Alex, thanks for coming on this morning. We appreciate it.
Ken, thank you for having me. The sweetest sound I've heard this morning is last budget address regarding Governor Murphy and what we're seeing today. Thank goodness it's the last one. Couldn't take much more.
Yes, but he could come back in 4 years, though, right? New Jersey has
I
that weird law that they take 4 year gap and then they can come back and run again. Let's just hope that
Don't
doesn't
give me nightmares, Ken. It's too early for that.
happen. Sorry, Ajita. So New Jerseyans are feeling squeezed. Of course, we've got tolls, transit fares, the gas taxes are up, energy costs are climbing, crime is through the roof, renters haven't seen relief to keep pace with inflation. And Murphy has touted tax cuts like the child tax credit and property tax relief. But do you think that those measures are cutting through the noise for residents, or are they just band-aids for a bigger problem?
I mean, I'll preface this all by saying I'm no economist, but it seems to me that a lot of what Governor Murphy has done to claim that he's bringing down costs over the last 7 years is essentially put it on the credit card. The governor and the Democrats in the legislature passed the Stay NJ property tax relief plan with no plan of how to pay for it. Now, look, property tax relief is a fantastic idea, and we should do a lot more of it. But when you pass a multi-billion-dollar problem without a multi-billion-dollar program without an idea of how to pay for it, you're being negligent at best and reckless at worst. And that's exactly what Governor Murphy, Speaker Coughlin, and Senate President Scutari have done here. How are we going to pay for this? In your long list, which all of those things that you said are correct, by the way, of the things that are falling apart in our state. One thing you didn't mention was NJ Transit, which used to be a gold standard across the nation that is now crumbling. The governor is hitting up corporations for a fee to try and fix NJ Transit. It hasn't got fixed yet, and we don't know where that sustainable revenue source for NJ Transit will be. This state is a mess, and Governor Murphy seems to only be capable of making things worse.
And he does it so well, doesn't he? President Trump's policies, his tariffs, deportations, and potential federal cuts are looming large. So economists say this could hit New Jersey's revenue and force more state spending. From your perspective, and a good one it is, how much of a wild card do you think Washington is in our budget equation here in New Jersey?
Well, Donald Trump is always a wild card in the best way. I've seen some studies that could suggest that the potential mass deportations will help the housing market. I don't know how big an impact that'll have because, as we've seen, the deportations have started, but we don't know what level they're going to get to. So set that aside. The thing that I'm really keeping an eye on is whether or not Trenton Democrats and the NJEA will put our children's future on the line in order to protect a handful of performative programs regarding DEI. The president put out in an executive order that federal funding could be stripped from schools and states that continue to persist in these outmoded, unworkable DEI programs that do nothing but make people angry. $1 billion in federal education funding is at stake. The deadline is coming up. The clock is ticking. And Trenton Democrats seem more interested in posturing and saying that they're standing up to the Trump administration when in reality, they are running the risk of gravely harming the education of our children. That stunt is something that has to end. I have zero confidence that Governor Murphy is going to end it. Take a drink every time he criticizes President Trump in this budget address this afternoon.
I'll pass out.
Well,
I
you
mean,
could
look,
use Coca-Cola, Ken. I didn't say what you would
okay,
drink.
all right.
Drink some water, you'll be
My
well hydrated so that you
coffee.
can yell at your TV.
No, I'll have to run to the bathroom every 2 minutes. But no, I mean, look at what happened with Maine just now. President Trump is not a man who minces words. When he tells you that he's going to cut off funding, he's not going to just tap dance around. He's going to cut off your funding. And the governor of Maine is a moron. I'm sorry it was bad enough that she is not obeying the law, but then to challenge him publicly, and you do not embarrass Trump because he will slap you down, he'll squash you like a bug. And I think what he said is true. Her political career is done. And if you look at Mainers, as liberal as they are, they realize they're billions in debt. And now 45% of their budget comes from DC. They're going to get that cut off. So go ahead. If that's the hill you want to die on, the 0.4% of people who are trans in this country are going to take your whole state down because you want to allow men with private parts to go and urinate next to your little daughter in school just so that their feelings aren't hurt. If that's the hill you want to die on for real, then go for it, Maine. And I think that's the issue. And thank you for letting me rant here, Alex.
Of course. The
The
wild thing about Governor Murphy is that he thinks of himself as this Trump whisperer. The governor
Right.
back in his younger days was with that hasty pudding club at Harvard at the elite institution he went to. I think he's a frustrated actor. He's certainly a frustrated game show host, if you remember those COVID briefings. And he
Yes.
thinks that he can act the part and charm Donald Trump into doing what he wants him to do. The problem is, Governor Murphy, Donald Trump has a TV and he can see you when you go out and you criticize him and try and score cheap political points and then woo him behind the scenes. I don't think the governor's strategy is going to work in this second Trump term. I don't think so at all.
Yeah, it doesn't really help to say, listen, I have a garage, and above the garage, I'm so loving to an illegal migrant that I'm letting her stay out in the garage with the dog. She can stay upstairs. And by the way, after she cleans our toilets, then we'll put her back in the garage. I mean, that was, I don't know about you, that was the creepiest description. And then the threat that he made to have federal agents come and get her. Go ahead, I dare you, I dare you. You think
It
you
was
think your
demeaning
two
to
New
the
York
person that he was speaking about.
it was, but that is the typical liberal who thinks they are crazy. Listen, and Alex, I've made no secret. I'm a gay man. I'm LGBT, but none of my friends in the LGBT community support all the stuff with the trans nonsense.
Right.
It is getting to the point where we're like, listen, if you're trans, God bless you, but we don't want 4-year-olds being talked to by somebody, in it being read in a library in school. I'm sorry, we're not for that. But you have people on the left who are virtue signaling, who think all people in the LGBT community are in lockstep, just like they thought that all people in the Hispanic community voted in lockstep and all people in the Black community vote in lockstep. This is
Well, what you
what
should watch
Democrats do.
what you should watch today in the speech, Ken, is how much time does Governor Murphy devote and how much money does he say he's going to spend on stockpiling mifepristone, the drug that Democrats fearmonger about the idea of Republicans restricting, that Governor Murphy, much like the nation has a strategic oil stockpile, is going to have a strategic abortion drug stockpile. I wonder how much of our money is going to be spent on that particular act of virtue signaling. We may find out this afternoon.
Unbelievable, Alex. Look, the state's fully funding its school aid formula, of course, for the first time in years, but some of the districts are still losing out. Superintendents say that flat funding feels like a cut because you got all the rising costs. And if President Trump were to follow through on the scrapping of the DOE, what do you think will happen with New Jersey schools and property taxes?
What I think is that about 5 or 10 people in the entire state understand the school funding formula. Governor Murphy's not one of them. I think that the school funding formula is deliberately constructed to be confusing and needs to be simplified. I think that it should be a pretty simple idea that the cost of educating a kid should be about the same wherever you are in the state, because every child is valuable and every child's education is important. I think that the state has to make sure that it doesn't take too large of a role in educating children, because in reality, we have local control. Our local school boards are the best places to determine how, when, and where to educate the kids in those particular districts. We have local control for a reason. I frankly hope the Department of Education goes away on both the federal and the state level, because in reality, what it does, and this is important, it basically passes along the funding from one level of government to another. You should do that, but I don't know how many people it takes. It doesn't take all that many people. The
Yeah, they
state
do it.
and the
They do it
feds.
in the process. I didn't mean to step on you, Alex. They do it, but in the
Yeah.
process, they skim off the top as they pass it from one level to another. I will never forget as a kid visiting Washington, and I remember somebody telling me that for every dollar spent on welfare in the federal government, 17 cents makes it to the recipient. So where does all that money go? You really truly want to help people. 100 years ago, there was no welfare system. You had charities, you had churches, but the left doesn't believe in religion. They hate religion. So they would rather control all the money and dole it out the way they want to. And this is the same thing with the Department of Education. Prior to 1980, there was no federal DOE. Somehow we all got educated. But now, and since, by the way, we have the federal DOE, our graduation rates have declined and people come out less educated. So clearly spending more money on a federal basis isn't the answer. So let me ask you this now. You have been on both sides, of course, of this. You've been a journalist, a reporter for years, and a darn good one. I remember watching you,
Thank you.
and of course you ran for Senate. So or you ran for office, I should say. So now, what is the one thing that New Jerseyans should watch for when Murphy steps up to that podium today? Because you know what a politician would think like, although I don't mean that as a derogatory thing. And then
It's
as a
fine. It's like
journalist, you'll
Hannibal
be
Lecter.
looking
You got to get inside of these people in order to catch them, kind of that kind of thing. I think that
no
what you're going to
fava
look
beans though.
Yes. What you're going to look for is how much of this is performative. I really mean that. How much of this is about dinging Trump and about standing up for what the governor calls Jersey values that he's never quite articulated. What is a
Mhm.
Jersey value, and how does a guy from Massachusetts know what it is? So I think you look for that. You look for the defense of the appalling 7 years of his administration. He's going to be bragging a lot. But in reality, Ken, what you should really look for is your calendar, because
Mhm.
nothing that is being said today really matters. And this is why. This budget is not being written today. It's not written previously. It's going to be written in the back rooms of the legislature and the governor's office by Democrats between now and about June 23rd. The budget deadline is June 30th. The state has to pass a budget, a balanced budget, by 11:59 p.m. on June 30th. That's state law. But what you've seen and what I've seen as a reporter is in this last week of June, when no one is watching, when people are starting to go away, when schools are closing for the summer and parents want to take their kids on vacation, Democrats are hauling out these massive budget proposals that no one has time to read. Occasionally, committees are voting on literally blank pieces of paper, and there are not enough Republicans in the legislature to stop it. This thing gets jammed through at the last minute with whatever the governor, Democratic Senate President, Democratic Speaker of the Assembly want. Those three men in a room, they write it, they put it together, and we pay for it. And if you don't like that, after you watch the speech today, go and find out who's running for state assembly in your district as a Republican and help them out, because that's my suggestion for what you should do today.
Alex, I think you're being a little harsh. I mean, look, we all know for fact that there are both sides that will be looking at this budget, the ultra socialist liberal Democrats and the socialist liberal Democrats. So at least it'll be balanced when they sit down and write this
Bipartisan,
ridiculous budget. Yes.
the
That's see,
socialists
that
and
is
the
a liberal.
communists.
Right. That is bipartisan in the mind of a Democrat. When you look at any of the mainstream legacy media, right, when they have seven liberals on and then the token Republican who's a moderate Republican, and that's considered moderate because in their minds, Republicans don't even deserve a seat at the table. They're all crazy. And so we'll just put one on to be gratuitous and as a token, and we'll let that person sit there and we'll have the seven attack him for 45 minutes and maybe give him one question to field. That's the mind of a liberal, and that's why they are now out of office federally. Let's hope the same thing can happen in the state. Alex Zdan, former U.S. Senate candidate, longtime TV reporter. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm sorry that this is just the first time I've had you on. I want you on a regular basis if you can muster the time. Please come and join us in the morning. We'd love to have you on.
Thanks, Ken. Really appreciate it.
You bet. I appreciate you, sir. Have a good day.